we sometimes feel like we have to figure it out or respond right away. But I just want to remind you and let you remind yourself, you don't owe immediate responses. In majority of the case, in 99% of things, you can gently remind yourself there are no emergencies here. We like to say there are no business emergencies. For most of our work, it is not an emergency. You get to move at a pace that honors your humanity. And maybe you've never been given that permission before. Maybe you've never been shown what that looks and feels like, and so your system is used to operating a million miles an hour. What is happening, though, when we're in that space is that everything becomes this triage instead of true leadership.
Overwhelm, reaction mode, and just keeping up are the old way.
You need real, root-level strategies and practical steps to grow your business or ministry without exhaustion and burnout.
Hi there, we're Anna Saucier
And Megan Gephardt,
best friends and business consultants who help faith-filled women create sustainable growth through simple strategy with a people-first approach.
Here at Apostolic Fruit, we hope to offer you clarity, support, accompaniment, and healing,
one tiny step at a time.
Hello, my friend. Megan Gephardt here. Welcome back to the Apostolic Fruit Podcast. So today we're going to talk about what do we do when everything feels urgent? How to prioritize when you're spread thin. We're going to go through some practical frameworks, a little bit of mindset shifts for just giving you some ways to discern what actually needs your attention, or maybe what needs your attention first when everything feels equally important. So if you're in the thick of it, if you feel like you're maxed out, everything feels really demanding, it becomes nearly impossible to prioritize. The thing is, urgency doesn't always equal importance, and the answer is not to bulldoze through. So the key to more sustainable leadership, to more sustainable growth in your business, is knowing how to actually discern what really needs you and your attention, and what can wait, what can shift, what can be adjusted, what can be delegated. This is how we take care of what's really critical now. We get through that immediate pressure, and at the same time, we work towards creating more breathing room so that we can build more sustainability into all of it. Okay, so let's just begin talking about what this may feel like. You may feel this sense of panic of everything feels like a priority. Like everything is screaming at me at the same volume, I don't even know where to begin. So if you feel any of that chaos of a packed inbox, a full client load, you're trying to keep marketing going, you're managing a team maybe, you've got conversations with leads or potential clients, or you've got new client onboarding, you've got these deadlines, you've got projects you're trying to get to, maybe never really get to, you've got a to-do list 1,000 miles long, and you feel like, I've got no space to even think. My day-to-day is just so packed alongside the rest of your life. So I know a lot of women that we serve, you're also maybe homeschooling your kids, or your kids are on summer break right now and you've got even lower capacity than usual. You're just navigating a lot in life. So if you're finding yourself in that space, you just hear me, I just took a deep breath. If you're finding yourself in that space of, I've just got to get through this in one piece, I've just got to make it through this busy season, get through this next stage or whatever it is, and I'm going to get some breathing room, or get through this next launch, then I'm going to get some breathing room. We see you. And when we're in the swirl, often, it's really hard to see the priorities clearly. So I just want to invite you for a moment, if you're in that place where everything feels urgent, it's not just you. You're human. It's okay. This is normal to feel this way. But we're going to invite you to approach this a little bit differently. We're going to walk through a better way and some frameworks to navigate these moments when you feel like, okay, everything is really, really pressing right now. Where do I even begin? The very first mindset shift to constantly remind yourself is that urgency does not equal importance. They are not the same thing. Not everything is a fire that needs to be put out immediately, even if it is often presented that way, or maybe it's coming at us quickly. I think our society and just the way that things are so immediate, the way that things are so interconnected, our social media, email, all the stuff, things are often hitting us very quickly. And the implicit expectation around it is that we have to respond immediately. And so what ends up happening is this sense of urgency is hijacking our nervous system. And so we're feeling this pressure, this expectation to react instead of intentionally responding. So many of these situations day to day are interpreted by our mind or our body as an internal emergency, even if it's not always the most important or the most pressing thing in the world. We sometimes feel like we have to figure it out or respond right away. But I just want to remind you and let you remind yourself, you don't owe immediate responses. In majority of the case, in 99% of things, you can gently remind yourself there are no emergencies here. We like to say, like, there are no business emergencies. For most of our work, it is not an emergency. You get to move at a pace that honors your humanity. And maybe you've never been given that permission before. Maybe you've never been shown what that looks and feels like. And so your system is used to operating 1,000,000 miles an hour. What is happening, though, when we're in that space is that everything becomes this triage instead of true leadership. So if you're noticing you've got a lot of decision fatigue when you sit down to maybe your limited work time, like, what do I even focus on? What's going to be the best use of my time here? I've got way more to do than I've got time for, right? Or if you feel like your day is often a whack-a-mole game, you're just kind of trying to get through things, or you're feeling that tension of like never enough time for all the stuff that you've got to do, we want to gently challenge this pattern. Because it's not that you're not being productive enough, or you've got to like get your crap together so that you can get more accomplished on this list, but you're probably just maxed out. You probably haven't been taught how to lead from this clarity and calm rather than the chaos. And so your nervous system is in that overdrive like we've talked about. And in that space, it is so hard to make really good sound decisions. We don't have the clarity in decision-making. It's like this fog. It's really, really important to just remember you always have the agency to pause, to zoom out, to name or rename for yourself, and also for anybody you're leading, if you have a team or if you have a virtual assistant or whoever it may be, to name what matters and then to make space for it. We just had a client that we were working on establishing some rhythms in this season for their business and their family and home life and the integration between those things. And they were in a very full, demanding season, like you probably are as well. And they expressed to us, this was one of the biggest fruits of our time together, just remembering, hey, we can do this. It's so freeing to do this. To remember we can look at what's happening in our lives and make decisions, like as a meta skill, not even just the decisions that we made themselves and how helpful they were, but knowing how to reevaluate what's important, how to prioritize, and also prioritizing our overall well-being and not just the tasks. Can we pause for a moment and think about that, right? Can we actually prioritize not just getting stuff done, but our well-being in the process? And then they also expressed just how fruitful it has been making space for white space. I just thought this was so beautiful, and it sounds so simple, but the thing is, this can be that transformational. Just remembering we have the agency, the freedom to pause, to zoom back out for a moment, to pull ourselves out of what feels like an emergency or a series of emergencies of all the things that are coming at us from all the directions, right? To then name what's important and then prioritize the space for it. Next, I want to provide a 3-part framework to help with prioritization. So we can use these lenses to assess what matters most when we are feeling the swirl of like all the things that are urgent and I don't know what's important and what's most important and how to sort through all of this. So the first lens is time sensitivity. You can ask yourself, what truly has a deadline here? And not just a self-imposed deadline. And I'm kind of laughing because so often in, especially entrepreneurship, this is us, right? So check yourself and notice, what are you expecting of yourself that is self-imposed pressure or self-imposed timelines? Or ask, where is this pressure coming from? Because often it's a combination of both the self-imposed, but also externally imposed that we have now internalized. And it could be as simple as, we've had so many clients that share these things with us of like, I've been taught that I should be approaching it in these ways for a launch, or I've been told that I have to show up on social media every single day. I've got to show up in stories every single day. I've got to do all these things at XYZ frequency. Or maybe you feel like I'm really behind. I should be farther along by now. And so you're constantly beating yourself up for not getting there fast enough, whatever the getting there is. Get more curious about it and look at it a little bit more critically. What actually has a real deadline here that I need to honor? And what could I give myself maybe a little bit more space and permission in? And remembering that that's not a failure. This is information. This is information that, okay, maybe I'm underestimating how much time things actually take, or I'm overestimating the amount of capacity I really have. And so that's good data for the next time around. Okay, so that's one piece on time sensitivity. The next part of this is what would create problems if it's not actually addressed maybe right away or this week or this month. So we don't want to just continually kick the can down the road. Like that may backfire on us at some point in time, but we also need to be realistic about how much of that flexibility we have with certain things. Because certain things will create more problems than others if they're delayed, right? That's the reality of it. So this is the first lens, is time sensitivity, and there's lots of ways we can kind of question it and play with it. The second lens in this prioritization framework that I want to give you is energy leaks. So what is disproportionately draining you inside your business? It could be, for example, clunky processes. You may have a packed inbox. You may miss communication. You may have broken systems. You may have certain types of tasks that you notice, these are really draining me. These are really wearing me down. They're not at all in my zone of genius. I would, if I could do this now, I totally would hand these things off to somebody else because they make me want to bang my head against the wall. Another one to ask yourself here is like, what is feeling heavier than maybe it should, or maybe than I expected it to feel? What am I noticing there's some friction around? That's an indicator that there may be something deeper there to explore, or maybe be something to get support in even. And then another piece we can ask ourselves with energy leaks is, what are you dreading that you're noticing keeps hanging over your head, or it feels like it's just weighing on your shoulders right now, that maybe you've been putting off, or you just haven't been able to, create the space for, you haven't had any time for, so it's kind of been on the back burner, but now it's like you're noticing that it's taking energy. It's really important to recognize that, because maybe because of the amount of energy that is now draining, maybe that becomes a higher priority. It's not only is it that you're not getting to that thing that you care about for some reason, it may be important, but now it's also taking an additional energy. So you see how it's an additional burden on top of the fact that it's not yet taken care of. The third lens I want to give you in prioritization is strategic impact. What is going to move the needle and be a longer-term investment in the business, in growing it or moving it forward in the ways that I want to move it forward in? What's aligned with your actual goals? Not just the shoulds, quote unquote, someone else told you that you should be doing, or your guilt maybe. Next, what if you take care of it would make everything else easier? What would make everything else smoother or flow more? What would free up time, energy, or your mental load if it's resolved? Okay, so I want to give you a little visual as an example of something you can do here. You could use a matrix. You may have heard about Eisenhower matrix, which basically is urgent, important versus not urgent or important. And we can start to assess the things that ought to be prioritized based on the intersection of what is both urgent and important. If you just set aside a couple minutes and you start to organize things into those categories, it can bring some clarity. So I want to give you a couple more quick, how do I make these decisions when we're just fried? Sometimes your brain is too tired to think strategically, right? And so that's when we need a tool. I would recommend, this is something we do inside our monthly planning with our clients, is just a brain dump. Sometimes we just need a moment to get it all out of our head because it's swirling around there and it's just bogging us down and it's really distracting us from being able to focus or get started on anything because our brain wants to jump across all the different spaces and tasks, right, that are just swimming around in there. So sit down, give yourself a few minutes, time yourself if that's helpful with a time boundary, just do a brain dump. Then you could sort it by those lenses, by the lenses that we talked about of what's time sensitive, think about the energy leaks, think about the strategic impact, or even sort it into categories. Sometimes it's simply helpful just to say, oh yeah, these 3 things go under this one bucket. And it would make sense for me to sit down and just tackle all those together because I'm already going to be in the same type of energy space and headspace for those. And I will be minimizing context switching, which drains more energy, bouncing between, I need to do deep work. I need to do content creation, which is more of a creative space. I need to do client work, which is a different kind of space, admin stuff over here, which is a totally different kind of headspace, right? So you can see how much energy it would take to bounce between those, and you probably feel that. So it can be helpful just to, as we do a brain dump, to sort into categories and identify, yep, I'm going to tackle these things together, and then I'm going to tackle these other things together. Another one that I would recommend is thinking about each day identifying your daily top 3. Only 3 priorities a day, not 10. 3 things. What are your top 3 things today? It may not even be 3 things. Maybe for you, you've got 2 hours of work time because you're working very part-time and, your kids are on summer break and you're going to go spend the majority of the day out and you only have a really focused work block of 2 hours. Then maybe it's 1 or 2 things that day. So be really disciplined with yourself about cutting it down. And the point is not necessarily that we're limiting ourselves to only getting 3 things done, but the point is that it's a forcing function to identify what is more important than another thing here. Putting something in order, 1, 2, 3, forces us to say, yes, my number 1 thing is more important than my number 2. My number 2 thing is more important than my number 3. And if I don't get to any of the other 10 things that I love to get to, then I'm accepting that's okay because I have decided these other things are most important for today. So it's that habit and that discipline of thinking really critically about it and more strategically about our priorities. And then the last piece, this is another tool that I want to give you as an idea, is if you're a visionary, you're probably coming up with a lot of ideas often. And so I want to give you this space that you can just place things when they come into your brain. You can have a space for a parking lot or what we like to call an ideas garden. And it's really a safe space to just hold important, but maybe not for now, items or ideas. You could just have it inside a notebook and you know that there's a specific page that this goes on. You could have it inside a Google Doc, in a spreadsheet, whatever makes sense for you. But just know that there's a space and time for it, and it doesn't have to be now. You don't have to action every item right away, because sometimes that's the thing that can get visionaries so stuck, is you want to run forward with the ideas so fast before you're really evaluating kind of the strategy of it. Does this even support my goals right now? Do I have real capacity for this? Will it move the needle forward? What are the second and third order effects if I say yes to this? What does that mean I have to say no to then? And we often don't really ask those questions. We're just running forward with the idea as it comes. So if you're finding you're in a lot of reaction mode, or you're doing a lot of last minute pivoting, or you're underestimating constantly how long things are going to take, and you're kind of man, I got myself backed into this corner because I overcommitted to this thing, then that's something that I want to encourage you to do, is just have a parking lot, have a space for your ideas to go that you can always go back to and you can always look at, and you know that you just have peace of mind, but you don't have to move forward on it right away. The reality is we need to carve out space for the important things, right? Because otherwise the urgent tends to just overtake us. We drown in it. And it's like a current that continues to pull us further and further upstream. It moves very fast. And so we have to be intentional about clearing space for those important things. And what can be helpful is just carving out a block. Even just in the beginning of the week, we walk through a set the week process with all of our clients where it's one of our rhythms. And just looking ahead and saying, here's my most important things this week. And here's the time on my calendar I'm actually going to sit down and do that. So that way we're not just sitting down each morning and now we're looking at the fullness of our to-do list and saying, oh my gosh, where do I even begin? But we've already identified ahead for ourselves. This is what I'm going to be spending time on when I sit down for work that day. And we've done the heavy lifting and the thinking. And so now we just get to enter into that work and focus, right? If you're not spending time in what I'd like to call a CEO headspace throughout your week, at least probably 60 to 90 minutes to zoom out, to be in the vision, to be thinking at a higher level, to be looking at some strategy or some finances, making decisions, considering what are your needs, what are the needs of the team, maybe looking at delegation or looking at operational cleanup, maybe even behind the scenes or future planning, then we will never be able to shift out of reaction. Because that time to zoom out is where you're going to create clarity, direction, proactivity for yourself and anybody else involved in this mission with you. This is where you transition from just getting through to getting ahead. So it is something that is non-negotiable. One of my clients said to me the other day, we're discerning her next stage of support, and she said, I just know my struggle is, I know what the rhythms are. I know what I ought to be doing in terms of planning and the zooming out. I know that it's important, and yet, it's not sufficient enough to get me to actually do them. I need to be held in those rhythms. And that is exactly what support can do for you. Because sometimes it is hard to do this ourselves. When everything feels really, really pressing and urgent, it's really hard to sort through. And it's really hard to feel like we even have permission to pause and to take that step back. She said, even today, if this hadn't been on the schedule, this meeting that we had together, I would have worked on this presentation for 2 hours. And inside, I'm like, oh, I really don't want to meet Megan right now. I want to just get my stuff done. And it's like, yeah, I get it. It's totally valid. And she said, but we finished this call and I am so, so grateful. I'm always so grateful and glad that we do these. We had this conversation, and I have this perspective and this grounding, and that we've thought through things at this level. It is always valuable. It reduces my stress. It helps me then enter into my work feeling the way that I want to feel about my work. These leadership rhythms are so important. And in her business, and probably in yours too, and especially if you're at a crossroads point, a pivotal point, you're in between that place of things are working, but they're also not really sustainable in the way that they've been doing it. And maybe the structure needs to catch up to the growth, or maybe you're recognizing things have to shift. No matter how much changes, what she said too, no matter what evolves, the rhythms are the same. And so she said, if I'm just held in these rhythms, it doesn't matter what all is changing. I'm going to have the structures in place, right? So clarity leads to capacity. Pausing, zooming back out, it never feels convenient in the moment. You will feel the tensions in the moment, and it always bears fruit. The rhythms can help so much because it protects what's important. You don't have to get overtaken by the current of the urgent, because everything is not equally important. Your nervous system might need help remembering that sometimes. You need to remind yourself of that, but you also can be reminded of that externally, and that's why it's so helpful to not have to do this alone. So if you want hands-on help sorting through the swirl or sifting priorities or building some of these systems and rhythms and making more room to lead more proactively, if you're feeling kind of stuck in the weeds right now and you want to build towards more sustainable strategic growth, but you're there's just so much going on right now. I'm carrying so much and I don't even know where to begin or how to get out of the hamster wheel I'm in, then we'd love to support you. We'd love to explore working together. This is what we do. This is how we can help. If you're in that place, something's got to give, I can't keep doing it in the way that I've been doing it, this is not sustainable, you don't have to figure this out alone. It makes such a difference having a sounding board, somebody to hold some space, to create some structure, to hold the strategy alongside you in the vision. Because you don't need to do more. Here's the thing, last thing I'm going to leave you with, you don't need to do more. you actually probably need to do less. But you need to do what actually matters, and then you need to be able to release the rest. So let us help you with that simplification, with the streamlining, with the permission in the places that you need permission, because that's where you get the breathing room. And that's where you also then get to show up in a way that feels so much better. And this business doesn't just get to work, but it gets to work for you.
We hope you loved today's episode. If so, would you take a moment to share it with a friend?
If you haven't already, come connect with us human to human at apostolicfruit.com/connect. When you're ready, we'd love to support you more deeply.
May the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you,
And turn his face toward you and give you peace.